The Tennessee Titans got their guy, hiring Brian Callahan as their next head coach, but he has one thing to prove before all the hype and excitement are absolutely worth it. We got all that and much more coming up for you on today's episode of Locked On NFL. What's going on, football fans, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast,
NFL
breaking down all the biggest stories from around the National Football League. And it is Tuesday, so you get the nerdy pair here to break down all the numbers, the digits, the gadgets, the gizmos. We've got it all going on here. Luke Vaughn at Luke Vaughn NFL, myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola. We appreciate you very much for being here. Luke's going to join us here in just a little bit as we get to our yike and our like, what we liked and what we didn't from the week across the NFL, led off by a big-time coaching hire in Jacksonville. We're also going to be discussing the potential Super Bowl matchups that we're hoping to see and why we disagree on what championship weekend could look like. And to kick us all off, it's the Tennessee Titans hiring their new head coach and former Cincinnati Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. And Tennessee Titans fans are stoked, as you're going to see here in just a moment from Tyler Rowland, our host over at Locked On Titans. And I'm also going to tell you the one thing that I want to see from Brian Callahan before I'm willing to buy in completely in. I'm buying in a little bit, but I'm not ready to buy in completely. And I'll tell you why here in just a little bit. Thank you very much for being an everydayer here on the Locked On NFL podcast and making us your first listen of the day every day as a part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers can win $150 in bonus bets by simply placing a $5 bet. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. So look, Luke's going to join us here in just a little bit as we get to everything, but we had some late breaking news in the NFL on Monday night with the Tennessee Titans hiring now former Cincinnati Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan as their head coach. Now, I have one single reservation around Brian Callahan, and it's that I want to see the aggressiveness. You're going to hear from Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans here for a couple of minutes as he breaks down why this is a good hire for the Tennessee Titans. And a big piece that he focuses on is the idea of bringing the offense into today's NFL. And I think I need to see a little bit of that from Brian Callahan when he gets away from Zac Taylor, who arguably isn't fully caught up with today's NFL. So I'm going to explain to you the numbers behind that here in just a little bit. But let's start off here with Tyler Rowland and his reaction and his thoughts to this hire. And I'm going to warn you right now, he is pumped.
The Tennessee Titans not only hired the right coach, but this means that the Titans are truly going into the new era, going to the modern era of the NFL. Brian Callahan, former offensive coordinator from the Cincinnati Bengals, former offensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals. Look, guys, I've been talking about Brian Callahan for a few weeks now. As the smoke began to clear, it was obvious that this was the direction the Tennessee Titans were heading. And it makes too much sense. I mean, it makes so much sense. It's hard for me to believe that our Tennessee Titans did it. It makes incredible sense after 25 years to see the team modernize the front off. I mean, we're going to get into the big picture ramifications at the end of the show. But right now, Brian Callahan, again, I'm throwing the picture back up. That is the man right there. An NFL lifer, ladies and gentlemen, a child who was raised in the NFL. Think about Bane. You were molded by the NFL. Brian Callahan was born in the NFL, molded by it. I mean, whew, man, what an incredible. So, number one, Brian Callahan, a quarterback guru. He has worked with some of the best quarterbacks that we have seen. Obviously, you know about Joe Burrow, but he also worked with Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning has vouched for this man in a major way. He was the coaching assistant for the Denver Broncos in 2010. He then moved up to an offensive quality control coach, then an offensive assistant, then a quarterback coach with the Detroit Lions. So you go from Peyton Manning to Matthew Stafford. He was the quarterback coach of the Oakland Raiders, so he worked with Derek Carr. Yeah, that's great. But then he became the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2019. He has worked with Joe Burrow, developed the Cincinnati Bengals offense into one of the best offensive systems in the entire NFL. All right? He is a former Super Bowl champion as a member of the Denver Broncos staff. I had somebody ask, what has Brian Callahan ever won? Well, he was on a Super Bowl winning team. So that has to count for something. Not only that, again, he is a child of the NFL. His father, Bill Callahan, is a longtime coach in the NFL. This guy is football. Football runs through his veins, okay? So everybody's worried about losing Mike Vrabel because he's a football guy. Brian Callahan is a football man, all right? He is a football man, an NFL man, born and bred by it. So he knows the game. He knows the business. He can relate to the players. He's seen it all. And to finally have a coach, after going through Jeff Fisher, after going through Mike Munchak, after going through Mike Mularkey, after going through Mike Vrabel, Mike after Mike after Mike, we finally have someone who is a passing game specialist, who is a quarterback whisperer, who can develop William Donovan Levis into the player that he has to be. This is phenomenal. This is incredible. Callahan, and some people ask the question, he didn't call plays. Is that a worry? He didn't call plays. I'm going to find the quote and have it ready for you tomorrow when we continue breaking this down. But Zac Taylor said it himself. I am not worried about Brian Callahan not calling plays because we built this offense together. We built the game plan. Callahan installed it for me. Every play call that Zac Taylor ever called, he has discussed intimately with Brian Callahan. Brian Callahan knows exactly how to call plays. I am not worried about that one bit.
Well, look, it is absolutely clear that Tyler Rowland over at Locked On Titans is excited about this hire. And again, I agree with the excitement. I just have a couple little things that I want to see. First of all, if you want to hear or watch the rest of Tyler's breakdown of this hire, he's got 30 minutes of absolute gold for you over at the Locked On Titans podcast, which you can find on your favorite podcast provider and YouTube, wherever you're getting this show. Just search Locked On Titans. Look, Callahan is a bright mind in the NFL. My one concern around Brian Callahan is when Tyler talks about getting the Titans into today's NFL. What does that mean? Generally, we talk about more play action, more motion, moving pockets, things like that, right? A lot of mobility, a lot of creativity over on the offensive side of the football. Now, while the Bengals with Brian Callahan working with Zac Taylor and Joe Burrow have put together a top 10 offense in 2 of the last 3 years, I do think that there are a couple of things that I just want to see because a lot of that was done as almost what we would call a pure drop back rate, right? So that's what we're looking at there. A lot of clean dropbacks, not a ton of play action, not a ton of moving the pocket, not a ton of motion in that Cincinnati Bengals offense. Joe Burrow, when he was under center for the Cincinnati Bengals, 20.6% play action percentage, 20.6. And that didn't tick up very much when they got the mobile Jake Browning there. Remember, Joe Burrow had his injury. Jake Browning started from weeks 10 on. 20.4% of Jake Browning's dropbacks were play action dropbacks. Let's compare that to Will Levis in 2023 with the Tennessee Titans. That was a number that ticks way up from there. 29.1% in 2023. So more play action in Tennessee than you saw in Cincinnati, but yet the hope is that the Cincinnati guy will come in and make the Titans team a little bit more modern in terms of their approach. So now we just want to see that when we get him away from Zac Taylor. Here's something else to keep in mind as well. Motion. The Tennessee Titans use motion at a slightly higher rate than the Cincinnati Bengals. The Titans were at 17.8%, while the Bengals were at 17.1%. So what I would like to see from Callahan when he gets to Tennessee is a little bit more play action usage, a little bit more motion, a little bit more playing towards Will Levis's strengths and moving the pieces around that are around him. So if you get the opportunity to see that from him, if they do that, the Tennessee Titans are going to be in a very, very good place in 2024 and beyond in Brian Callahan. That's what I'm going to be watching for. I'm not excited. I just want to hold off on my excitement until I see more of that from Callahan. All right. We've got a lot more for you coming up on today's episode of Locked On NFL. Let's get Luke back in here to break down the championship weekend matchups that we want to see in a couple weeks' time when the big game kicks off. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook, and that is because it has all kinds of cool promos and cool bets that you can make, especially here as the NFL season gets to its apex. That means it's time for betting Christmas. That is the Super Bowl. So get your prop bets ready. And if you want to get signed up right now ahead of time, great thing going on at FanDuel.com where you can get $150 in bonus bets for making any $5 bet. So that can be $5 on the 49ers money line. It can be $5 on Christian McCaffrey scoring a touchdown, or it can be something a little spicier, whatever you want. Put down $5. Whether that bet wins or loses, you get your $150. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up there. And if you're new, you can get $150 back in bonus bets for just making any $5 bet. Once again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, make every moment more.
All right, everybody, continuing on with this episode of Locked On NFL. Don't forget, we are your team every day. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day. Make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports today as well. 24/7 national sports YouTube stream, the first ever of its kind. Be a part of its history, or be a part of history by heading over to the Locked On Sports Today YouTube page and subscribing today. So, Luke, we're going to be taking a look at what we believe are the best possible Super Bowl matchups for this weekend. Luke, you want to kick us off with this one? What's the Super Bowl matchup that you really, really want in a couple of weeks here?
Sorry to be boring, but Ravens Niners. Here's the deal. Obviously, the Ravens, I want to see Lamar Jackson in the Super Bowl. We've seen a lot of Mahomes. Never going to complain about Mahomes on the national stage. There's not really a losing scenario there, but come on, let's see Lamar. Let's get something. We haven't seen it, right? We haven't even seen him in a championship game, so this is awesome. Right. And he's playing at like the peak of his powers, so I'm super into that. I can't do it with the Lions, man. I can't emotionally handle this. Is 100% a bias thing. I can't do it. If the Lions win a Super Bowl before the Vikings do, considering the content of the last 50 years for both franchises, I think the entire state of Minnesota might just have to sink back into the crust of the earth.
That bad, huh?
In reality, San Fran is really fun for me to watch. There's a lot of playmakers, and I think I really like that. Like, college football for me has never gripped me because a lot of it isn't like playmakers making plays. It's too much guys messing up, and then there's this wide open post route that then runs for 45 yards. Yeah. That doesn't grip me as much as, oh my God, Dre Greenlaw just made the diving interception on the tip drill. That kind of thing gets me a little bit more. And I feel like San Francisco is just top to bottom, like playmakers.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
As much as everybody's into the Lions story, and I get it, right? Like the fans have finally felt happiness for the first time in 100 years. Literally.
Yeah.
It's run its course for me. It's time. And
see, Luke,
I don't know. Best team in the NFC.
Yeah. This is where we disagree. I like Lamar Jackson is the best quarterback playing in the playoffs right now. He's the best quarterback in the 2023 season. I want to see him in the Super Bowl. There's no doubt about that for me. But the story of the Detroit Lions coming off the 0-16 season, literally like not that long ago, and coming from all of that to now, all of a sudden with the bite the kneecaps and all this stuff with Dan Campbell, rebuilding culture, all that other stuff, and then all of a sudden landing themselves in a Super Bowl. I do think that story is good. And I do think that the game would be good too. I think that that's one of those pieces. And I know that, like, look, Jared Goff is going to be one of the most boring quarterbacks you're ever going to watch play the game of football. There's no doubt about that. There's very little razzle dazzle. There's not any of that stuff. He's got some pretty good.
It's very Purdy-ish. It's just clean. Like, just go get the ball. Just go deliver the ball when it's supposed to be. Like, that's fairly similar play styles, but with like different kinds of bozo gene.
Yes. And then less playmakers for that. Like, you don't get the pleasure of watching Deebo Samuel run all over the field and do the things that he does so well. You don't get the pleasure of, Travis Kelce and the touchdowns. You don't get the pleasure of, or not Travis Kelce, I'm sorry, George Kittle. You don't get the pleasure of Christian McCaffrey running crazy and things like that. But look, I do think that the Detroit Lions do have the talent to make things interesting. You do have a CJ Gardner-Johnson who could end up with a Super Bowl interception, and just imagine the social media firestorm that sets off across all three of the fan bases that he has once played across. You do get the story of, a Jahmyr Gibbs who's an electrifying playmaker. Maybe he's the guy that ends up being that fun catch and run guy that you get to watch go out there and make plays, break ankles, do all these other things. I want to see the story and the best team at the same time. And for me, you get the best team with the Baltimore Ravens, because for me, it doesn't matter who the Baltimore Ravens play in the NFL or in the Super Bowl. The Baltimore Ravens are Super Bowl champions here in 2023. I'm all about it. But so whether it's San Francisco or Detroit, I got Baltimore on top, but I would much rather the story of the Detroit Lions in the Super Bowl at that point.
I fear I must derail this conversation. I've got breaking news.
Oh, I love breaking news.
Tom Pelissero tweeted that the Panthers have found their general manager. They're promoting Dan Morgan to president of football operations / general manager. Wow. He's been in the front office, I guess, and now he's the guy. So they promote from within. That's shocking.
Shocking that they weren't able to find an external hire to agree to work with David.
I guess that they chose to. I mean, they could have tried a little harder. Yeah. They made the decision to promote from within. I mean, the former player, the Ozzie Newsome move. Like, I get it.
This is fantastic news for the New Orleans Saints, by the way, because one of the few people to actually interview for this job was Kai Harley, the Saints capologist, the guy that's the Saints cap guru. The content guy, right? The guy that gives me content every single day of the offseason, stays in New Orleans.
That guy who angers the national media every single year and is going to again.
And I'm ready to do it all over again. The Saints are $86 million, maybe 92, who cares, $1 million over the salary cap. Light work, small potatoes. Kai Harley stays in New Orleans, and I could not be happier about that. And
the Saints' final record was
9-8, baby. Woo!
9-8. Right. And the Vikings, who took all the time in the world to make sure that they had better cap situation, the much healthier Vikings, 7-10, seen as the worst spot in the division. As two teams made it to the playoffs, and the Bears have like a ton of draft capital, and the Vikings are also here. But we fixed our cap. We don't have a defense, but hey, we fixed the cap.
Yeah,
I hope you guys like more Andrew Booth.
Yeah. All right. So look, I want I want Baltimore, Detroit. Luke wants Baltimore, San Francisco. We both leave the Kansas City Chiefs out of this conversation. Is that surprising at all?
Yeah, but Chiefs fans don't take it personally.
It's really not about.
The Chiefs would be very fun. Wouldn't complain. You won't hear a peep out of me. Can't lose with the AFC Championship. Should be an awesome game, and whoever goes to the Super Bowl, I'm stoked to watch.
All right, let's take a look at our yike and our like. This is a weekly deal for Luke and I. We go through one thing that we liked, one thing that we yike or didn't like from the week before, and we're going to lead it all off with Luke Braun being rated highly on the Nielsen rankings. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On NFL podcast is brought to you by GameTime. It's the best place to find last-minute tickets, especially if you are perhaps someone who lives in Northern California or perhaps around Baltimore, and you're trying to get to an event that you didn't maybe think that was not guaranteed to happen, and now you got to find last-minute tickets. That's what GameTime can be. But it's not just football games. It's basketball. It's hockey. It's comedy, theater, everything. No matter what it is, you can find last-minute seats, flash deals, even an hour into the event. If you are just decide like, whoa, that thing's going to start right now. We'll never make it in time, but maybe we can catch the last half. You can still do that at GameTime. Absolutely. That'll work. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Right now, all GameTime users get a $100 off of a big game ticket with code VEGAS100. Terms apply. Just download the GameTime app and use code VEGAS100 for $100 off of a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off of your first purchase. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, everybody, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL with our weekly tradition here on the Tuesday episodes with our yike and our like. We'll go over one thing that we like from the week before, one thing that we yiked or don't like from the week before as well. We appreciate you very much. Don't forget, we are your team every day. Come back tomorrow as Chris Carter and James Rapien answer the biggest questions for your Wednesday episode of Locked On NFL and keep you up to date with all of the big coaching carousels as they continue to twirl. So, Luke, let's start off with your like for this week, good sir.
So, on Monday morning, the Jacksonville Jaguars hired Ryan Nielsen. I think this rocks.
Yeah.
Ryan Nielsen's a pretty aggressive D coordinator, if I'm not mistaken, right? You know him better than I do.
Yeah, he very
and I wanted aggression for the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars are in a perfect spot defensively right now with where their roster is at, to be kind of YOLO. And that's why I thought, like, man, that would be an interesting spot for like a Brian Flores type to go, or for them to try to be the next team that tries to adopt Brian Flores's scheme. That was a thought that I had 2 months ago before everything fell apart. I don't think anybody's going to now, but that was where I was at. So I got it in my head that like the Jags should be aggressive. And the two times I truly studied the Saints this year, one was watching them against Carolina, preparing for the Vikings versus Carolina, and the other one was preparing to actually cover the Saints game the Vikings played. But all that time, and then watching that Saints game, I loved what the Saints did in run fits. I thought they were so clever and creative and intentional with how they deployed run stunts and how they used the talent that they had up front. There were just a lot of times when they managed to figure out a way to get the linebacker free to go into the gap he needed to go into. Yeah. And I love what Pete Werner did all year. Or at least in the games that I watched.
Yeah.
I just think this rocks for Jacksonville. I think they are going to be really smart on defense, and with hopefully Trevor Lawrence and that offense continuing to gel, we got to hope he hasn't hit his ceiling here yet, but he was hurt. So, you can kind of project a little bit better for them. I don't know. It just feels like a complete unit, and that AFC South is just so dang fun all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think he's going to be a good fit too. We talked a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, maybe the week before, about the potential for like a Wink Martindale, Doug Peterson combination in Jacksonville and how fun that would have been. I don't think this is too entirely different. Ryan Nielsen's a little bit more about trying to get pressure with the front four, doesn't blitz as much as a Wink Martindale, doesn't blitz nearly as much as a Brian Flores, but he's still on the aggressive side, just like the guy that basically, is sort of the sort of parent of his coaching tree in Dennis Allen, believe it or not. I mean, that's the way that you could look at it. Is like that's kind of Dennis Allen's brand. That's going to be Ryan Nielsen's brand as well. The other thing that I really like about Ryan Nielsen, just like off the field, he's a he just builds fantastic relationships with players. Like the entire time that he was here in New Orleans, players from when he was at NC State wanted to come here to New Orleans, wanted to play. They showed up as undrafted free agents. They showed up some other way. Every one of those guys came on like visits during the draft process and all the other stuff. When he went to Atlanta, he took 2 or 3 defensive players, including David Onyemata, the defensive tackle, and then Caden Ellis, the linebacker, with him there. Kentavious Street followed him over there. Kentavious Street was a guy that followed him from NC State days and stuff here to New Orleans when he was a free agent. Like, he's just one of those dudes where, like, wherever he goes, there's always former players that follow him. And I think that says something big time about the relationships that you build as a coach. So I think that's the thing that's really cool about Jacksonville as well, because that was such a big piece of the rebrand of the Jacksonville Jaguars with Doug Peterson, was fixing the culture. And I think that Ryan Nielsen goes further into that conversation as well. My like from this week is also a coaching hire. The Raiders got it right, man. The Raiders got it absolutely right by removing the interim tag for Antonio Pierce. You want to talk about building relationships. You want to talk about like building a culture. My goodness, did Antonio Pierce find a way to do that? Yeah. In the pros. And so, I think that like
we don't talk about it.
Yeah, right. But like, honestly, like what he did in Vegas and the excitement that he kind of drew there and all, it felt like the right hire for them. And I think that they made the right decision. I mean, they got to the point to where like you had guys like Max Crosby and Josh Jacobs saying that they'll go somewhere else, asked to go somewhere else if Antonio Pierce isn't named the head coach and all that stuff. And how much of that is lip service, how much of that is real, we won't know because they hired him. But man, like they made the right choice for them at this time, I think. And I really like the removal of the interim tag, making him the head coach. We've seen the Raiders now for 2 years straight, or for 2 times now, move on to an interim head coach, and the interim head coach helping the team perform better than they did with the head coach that was originally there. And this time, like last time, they made the wrong decision, I thought, with Rich Bisaccia. They went to Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels didn't work out. They almost made the wrong decision, or could have made the wrong decision again here with Antonio Pierce, but I think that they got it
right. I'm going to shoot my yike, which part it's sort of half a yike, half a like, at Darius Slayton, who, as we've been recording, like a couple hours before we started recording, he was quote tweeting somebody basically pointing out how much better Patrick Mahomes has been than Daniel Jones. Maybe a third Super Bowl, blah, blah, blah. Daniel Jones expectations are way lower. It's fair enough, right? And Darius Slayton, in an attempt to stick up for his quarterback, says, well, Mahomes has played with a Hall of Fame wide receiver and tight end. And I mean, he's had such a better situation. Darius, what do you mean by that?
What do you mean?
What's that for? My dude, in an attempt to stand up for his quarterback, he just cooked himself worse than I've seen anyone cook him. Dude, that's you. You're the guy that you're mad at. That's you. That's you.
He's like, whoa. But wait, Patrick Mahomes has a better wide receiver than me. Like,
yeah, I suck.
Of course he's doing great.
It's mine. Now that I think
he's throwing the football to. Look who Dan is throwing the football to. Me. Yeah. Yikes. What a cook.
He cooked himself. But you know what? I kind of love it. Stand up for your quarterback, even if it means roasting the absolute heck out of yourself. So you know what? Maybe it's a second like, which I can do. You can't stop me.
I enjoy both. Yeah, what are we going to do? Call it, please? It's both. I love it. I love that a lot. That's outstanding. That's really good. Shout out to Darius Slayton, who will go to the ends of the earth, apparently, for Daniel Jones, his quarterback. That's the way to be. That would be like me being like, Luke's a really, really good podcast host. And then somebody else being like, well, I think that this other person's better. And I'm like, yeah, but look at that person's co-host. You know what I mean? He's carried by his co-host. Luke has to drag me my dead limping body behind him in order to do a show. That's
really fair, though. Wig's the GOAT.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. Fair. All right. I got my yike here, and my yike is simply the Buffalo Bills. And I'm not,
man.
Man. But look, I'm doing this respectfully. Because I'm not going to sit here like
the Bills can say. They didn't do that respectfully. Imagine shoveling snow, man, for 20 hours.
Like you've got volunteer, like credit exposure and experience people showing up and like shoveling your snow for you, all that. You've got this fan base that is like was ready. Yeah, the Patrick Mahomes has to go on the road. He's got to come to our house, yada yada, and then it's just not there, and it's heartbreaking. It's disappointing, and it's a yike for me. Like this was the year it felt like for them. And there was somebody I heard say that the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen battle is going to be the next Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Eli Manning battle. And as of right now, I can't say yes to that because Peyton Manning and the Indianapolis Colts won some of those games. That's more than what we can say about the Buffalo Bills in their battle so far with the Kansas City Chiefs. But dude, so far is like a handful of years at this point, right? Like this isn't a one-time thing or whatever, or at least a few years. This isn't a one-time thing kind of deal. And so look, Patrick Mahomes is 6 for 6 now on seasons played in AFC Championship appearances. I mean, it just is what it is.
Bananas. 2 more years for Mahomes to hit the record. And then
so
and To be honest, we keep this up for 2 more years, 2 more AFC championships, maybe Super Bowls and stuff like that. Yeah, we're going to start having some tough MJ LeBron debates.
Oh man. They're on their way. They're on their way for sure. And I just think it's unfortunate that for the past few years, the Buffalo Bills have been merely a footnote in that story as opposed to their own story. Like they should have the main character energy right now, and they just simply don't.
Like if you're the Colts or the Steelers, at least you got one, right? At least you snuck in there for a couple. You don't want to be the Chargers of this.
Right.
You don't want to be the Phillip Rivers of this.
Oof. Yikes. Josh Allen goes from Peyton Manning comparisons to Phillip Rivers comparisons in the matter of 4 minutes.
Ugh.
That's a yike right there, my friend.
That's a yike.
All right. So we appreciate you very much for being with us here and making Locked On NFL your first listen. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 YouTube stream, the first of its kind on YouTube. So go and find it today over at Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. For Luke Braun, I am Ross Jackson. We appreciate you very much for being here with us and making us your first listen of the day every day and being everydayers here for Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.